Welcome to the McSherryStudio. Don't forget to click the like button and also subscribe to this YouTube channel, and that way you'll get notifications of new painting videos as I post them up, and you can do both using the buttons below here. If you like the paintings that are done in these demonstrations, you can always acquire one, and you can do that on my website, McSherryStudio.com, and there's a link in the description below. So otherwise, paint oils, paint small, and paint often. Sort of do the palette thing again. It's always a good idea, isn't it? So we've got linseed oil, turpentine, and then our colours we have titanium white, cadmium yellow pale hue, permanent rose, cobalt blue, and I've got a mixture here of burnt umber and burnt sienna and black. I probably will be using the black today because it's a much more formal painting in a kind of an older style of painting, I suppose. So I'm going to use black to make my shadows, and I'll probably still use the burnt sienna for my wash and my drawing because this is fresher than that paint there. That's been on there for a while. Okay, so the first thing we start out with is of course a wash, and I'm going to. You always kind of put a wash in. It's very important. It kind of brings what you're painting on down to the tone of the palette that you're using to set the tones and the colours. So, to have them a roughly similar tone is a really good idea. Okay, and also it gives you the opportunity for happy accidents, for this wash to show through. And that wash can be any colour, really. It could be blue, it could be pink, any colour as long as it's not black or white, I suppose. So that's about the consistency of milk, say. And let's go here. I'm going to. What I'm painting on is a board. It's actually MDF. It's moisture-resistant MDF because I couldn't go down to the art shop and buy myself any materials, or I couldn't even do it online because they kept closing the shopping cart on because they were overwhelmed with orders. So I went off and I made my own. I've got a table saw and I cut them. You can get the wood places to cut your panels for you at a push. And then I gessoed them. And gesso is a chalk-based paint for preparing canvases. Then we've got our toned board. First of all, I'm going to measure for your benefit. So that's the height of what I'm painting against the width. It's about 2/3 the width of its height. I'm going to check that again for me because this is different. The angle of the camera is making it different for you than it is for me. That seems to be about it. 2/3. So that means that I could draw. If I said I didn't want anything to come out further than there, I know that that is supposed to be only 2/3 of the height. So if I did that, 1/3 is about there. That's about something like that. So I know that my height could be like that. The top of the bottle would be up there, and the bottom grape is going to be here. The likelihood is that I'll exceed that, but let's put it in, give it a bit of air on either side. You've always got to sort of take into account that you might be framing this, and if you frame it, you'll lose 6 millimeters from each edge. Okay. So I know that the bread comes out there, top of the bottle comes out there. The wine glass doesn't come to halfway, does it? No, it comes to 2/3 of the way. Wine glass comes to about there. So it's going to be a smallish bottle. The last grape comes down to there. We know that the grapes come all the way out there. Let's get the bottle in first, actually. That might be the easiest thing. Something like that. That allows for the bread to come out here, to come down to about there. Okay, so now I've got bottle shape. Does the bottle come out to halfway? Where's the halfway point in this? Almost to halfway the bottle. There. That means the bread actually comes in to about there. The bread's quite small. And you draw in straight lines. You don't try to paint curves or to draw curves, because you just come unstuck. The glass comes to about there, about here actually. Other than that, there's the change brush again. Comes down. We know that the stand of the glass, or whatever you call it, is there. That means we can get a steer on how to do the grapes. See, I've exceeded my box there, but it's not too bad because I allowed for it. We're just trying to get in the general shape. The last grape comes to about there. Okay. Wine, something like that, comes to about there. All of this can be changed at a later stage and remodeled. I think the top of the wine bottle could come up a little bit further. There's a curve on that there. Wine label 1. Wine label 2. Plonk de plonk. So the bread is something like that. There's a kind of a shadow underneath it, shadow there, bit of linen coming up there, linen coming around there. We'll just take it off to the side there. Shadow there, shadow of the bread coming across there. We're not drawing individual grapes, okay? Even that sort of straight lines. Okay, there's the grapes coming off there like that. Okay, so that's roughly our drawing, I think. All of this is going to be sort of sculpted and amended as we go on, okay? So I'm going to do a bit of a notan. So I like doing notans. It's over the last year or so, I've just really enjoyed making notans, and that's in between an underpainting and a drawing, okay? So it's not going to the full extent of an underpainting, so I'm just putting in tonal areas. It'll give me an idea of how this thing will look as a painting, I suppose. I could probably go up a bit there. Okay. Getting rid of that line. Grapes. It's a mass. It's, you know, it's kind of like a solid mass that you're painting of the general shape of how the grapes fall. And then we've got those grapes there. And then we've got some shadow there. That's casting shadow down there. Shadow there. Shadow underneath that. Shadow there. The important thing is, right, is to realise that it's not painting up to lines. You know, it's a more tonal thing. You've got to learn to be tonal. Bring that up there. Okay. Right. I'm going to start out painting with some of the darks. And the darks that I see in that bottle, in that wine glass, in the grapes. So I'm just going to mix up a dark. It is really quite dark. So I'm going to mix up blue, red, a little bit of yellow. Just the three primary colours to make my dark. And remember, it's the tone. It's the tone that counts. If that was a dark red or a really dark green or a really dark blue, it would be all the one. It would be fine. I'll just put a little bit of burnt sienna in there, give it a bit of punch. We'll add a little bit of oil to it. Because we're only generalizing at the moment. We're only putting in the general tones. All right, here we go. I'm going to start out down here. Mix it up a little bit darker. Clear glass. You paint through it. Okay. And in the grapes, we've got similar sort of darkness. We can paint into all this at a later stage. All right. That's our general shape there. I'm just going to put in that red top on that bottle. It's annoying me sitting up there. A little bit of red and yellow with a predominance on the red. Okay. Up there like that. Bit of dark above it. It's top of the bottle. Let's do the bread. So the bread is essentially a red, kind of a dull red, brownish. Okay, so let's make that up. We make a bit of white, a bit of yellow, a bit of red, and a bit of blue. The way to make a brown, like if you're ever going to mix paint in your head, is mixing red and green. That makes a brown. But we don't have a green on here. So the green is the yellow and the blue paint mixed together, and then the red is the permanent rose. So it still works the same way. We're still doing the same thing. And the white makes it pale. So it's varying amounts there. Okay, something like that. It's a dull red. We'll put that in. Okay, I'm going to add a little bit of white to that. A bit more yellow. To the same mix that I made up. Put that in there. Down the side of the bread. Now the meat of the bread, the fluffy meat, is essentially a grey. Let's make that up. So white, yellow. Grey is anything that's an indeterminate colour. Okay, and blue. White, yellow, and blue, and red. Still the same three primary colours. And then you just put varying degrees of whichever one you want, just until it seems to be right. But it's not white. You know, you talk about the white of the bread. It's not white. Let me hold it up against it. It's yellower than that. All right, we'll try that. Through there. Okay, so now we have the meat of the bread in. Let's put in a background. We're blocking in. The background is blue. Get that off there. And white. Put a little bit of red into it. Okay. And more white. Bit of oil into it, help it move around. I better make some more because we've more area to cover than usual. Okay, that would be our background, something like that. A bit more red, a bit more oil. Here we go. That's probably more down here. Through the glass. Into there. I'm just going to keep my glass shape. I don't want to lose my glass. So I'm not painting all the way up and covering that that edge. And that comes down to there. And that's around there like that. It kind of goes a little bit lighter as it rises towards the top, and that light. Better put something in there as well. Add a little bit of white to that mix that I made. Okay. must have a bit of room to put in that label or whatever it is they call it. What you would call it. The neck label. Covering all this. This is we'll be painting back into that in the future, but we just need to get that blocked in. Once we get that blocked in, it'll be much easier to move the paint around subsequently. Okay, so we better do something with those labels, hadn't we? Let's do something with the labels. I don't particularly like those fleshy coloured labels that there are, so I'm going to make up more as if the labels were white. So I'm going to knock them back. I'm just making it here. That's a bit pink at the moment, but white. But they can't be white. I'll show you in a second why. Take them away from the high tone of the white. I'll show you now in a second. See, nothing can be white in this painting apart from the highlight here, the highlight on the top of the bottle there, the one coming down the bottle here. Even this isn't white. Okay, there are a couple of highlights on the grapes. Yeah, that's it. So, in other words, so the label, I'm going to put that in there like that. So now we have a label. Now we have the other label, the front of the wine bottle. Okay, let's do the foreground. As I said, the foreground can't be white, even though it's a white cloth, because of those highlights. So for you, like it might seem, for me it certainly does, that the camera is blowing out all that sort of light colour on the linen to the left. But it can't be like that in reality. That's just a limitation of the camera and the computers that we're using, I suppose. So I'm going to make up what I'm going to use for the linen. So a jigger of white there, yellow, red, a little bit of blue to knock it down into away from the highlights tonally. Put a bit of oil into it. But it is warm. It's warm on the left and cool on the right. So more yellow and more red. More yellow. More red. More yellow. Bit of white. Bit of oil. Okay, so now we've got that's going to serve as our white linen. Now we need shadow because the shadow's all over the place. So I'm just going to take a little bit of black. Put a bit of black off to the side. And that just makes our shadow kind of instantly. Yesterday we were using the colours to make the shadows. Today we're just going to use a little bit of black and also put in colours as well because it's quite blue. So a bit of blue, a bit of red. Yeah. So now we have a shadow version. Okay, you can see all the shadows off to the right of the bottle and down to the right of the grapes and underneath the grape. There's shadows being cast here, for example. And once you get into the shadows, you can start sculpting things into shape. So shadow down there, shadow going across there. Do you remember we made this shadow out of the colour that we made for the white? So we made the shadow from that, what we made for that. We haven't used it yet, but that's what we did. And that means it's linked in with that colour. It's not a separate shadow. You don't make separate shadows. You make the shadows of of whatever object is being that's casting the shadow. You make it out of the color that you made, and that's logical. But I often see people making an entirely separate mix for the shadow, and it never looks right. Okay, so in here, the shadow's all in here. And this, by the way, this is the real place to learn how to paint, doing this kind of thing. It's all very well painting from photographs, but you don't learn as much. And then there's that shadow coming across in there, and that comes all the way over to the bottle. Yes, painting from life is the thing. We've got any more shadows? Yeah, there's one down there. That's kind of across there like that. There. There, that has a shadow too. And that kind of goes into shadow as it curls around. Okay. All right, so we've got a whole bunch of our cast shadows. Shadows on the linen cast by the objects. I should bring that down, shouldn't I? You're probably wondering why that wasn't done. Okay, so now let's do the linen itself. So we mixed up the colour, didn't we? Already. It's darker than pure white. Okay, and we're going to put that in. But it's not competing with the highlights. Otherwise you'll lose the highlights. That's what I meant about, so I was kind of linking it in with singing. If you made the painting too light, you'd lose power in the highlights. The highlights just wouldn't seem like highlights anymore. I have to move those into each other a little bit. In there. Actually, that is all shadow there. And that shadow there as well. Right, let's just put that in there. I should have done that in there. So I still left my drawing in there so that I can see where I'm going. Let's do that thing up there, that label. That could also be that sort of white too. All right, that's almost done for blocking in. Yes, that's kind of done for blocking in, although I think I may put in a block of the wine red there. Okay, so now we have some wine in the glass. I think that we're blocked in. I'm going to push that out a little bit further. Okay. So I'm now going to get my filbert brush. Filbert. It's a bit sort of, it's gone a bit sort of toilet brushy, hasn't it? You see that slightly rounded, but still flat. Let's work on those grapes a little. That grape there is lighter. So I just made it sort of slightly redder. And that does occur in other grapes around this bunch. Up here, for example, that's redder there. There. Those ones are very dark still. dark there. We're not doing that stalk yet. No need to do the stalk yet. That's dark there. So we're starting to work into this wet paint. The essence of alla prima, working wet into wet. Okay, let's work on the bread a little bit. Underneath there, that's kind of darker and grayer. I even use a little bit of black into that bread colour. Put that in there. We're still not putting in sort of tiny little sort of dabs, and we're not working one part. We're not finishing one part before we move on to another. Let's do some work on the outside of the bread there. Up there. Make it more substantial. I'm just putting some sort of light powdery areas on the outside. Okay. I'm going to push that out a little bit. Just mixing up a little bit of push that out a little bit more there. Let's work on that bottle a bit. Can make some more dark. So now we're going to a more viscous paint. We'll shape that bottle more correctly at a later stage. We do that with the blue that's on the outside. So there's a nice lit part there. There's a green part. The bottle is actually green, but you can see that up here. Across there like that. And actually you can see it below. It's quite subtle actually, and you might not be able to see it on this computer screen across there, because that bit doesn't have any wine in it. So the wine's all sort of down in the end there. So we can actually see sort of through the green part of that bottle there. Let's shape the bottle a bit. I'm just mixing up some more of that background colour. Okay, here. Across there like that. Push that in a wee bit. Sculpt that across there. Sculpt that in. We can come back out with a bottle. That there. Now I'm going to change my brush a little bit. So now there's darks in here. There's really dark darks. That's actually reflecting the grapes along here. Okay, so I'm going to push that out. We can lose that bit of drawing there now because we have it. That comes up into the wine there, the meniscus of the wine there coming across there. There's a dark there. There's a dark come around there like that. There's a dark running down that side of the glass. Let's get back into that label there for a second. Push that over a wee bit there, and that can come across there like that. There's a bit of that light coming into the glass there. I'll change that later. There's a nice and interesting shadow. See the shadow here? Well, it's been reflected in the glass here. We'll put that in. And it comes up there like that. And also it's the same here. In there. But there's light coming through here. Putting that in. Let's put a shadow down by the side of that piece of bread. The piece of bread, let me have I need to make up a little bit more colour here to make the shadow. But you saw that shadow being made earlier on with the black into the mix for the white. I just ran out. Okay, so I'm just putting a bit more in. Let's see here, down here, okay. Comes across there like that. And down here as well, do something there, because it's kind of, the shadow is darker. The shadow is darker here too. And in here it's darker. I'm going to put in some more hue variations in the cloth. So it's kind of warmer and yellower across this side, across here, just in here. So I'm just putting, actually I'll use a bigger brush. Big jobs, big brushes, small jobs, small brushes. Let me get a bit more. Okay, here, as we come across here, it's a different hue because it's closer to the light. Just going to push that around a little bit of light there. As it goes bluer as it gets over here, but there'll still be some. Right, let's there, like that, across there, like that. Because linen, well, anything really, but it's particularly easy to observe in linen. It's reflecting everything all around it. Lovely white linen, and it's reflecting everything. So you've kind of got to get the sense that there's a lot going on here in terms of light. Okay, put that in there. All right, so we've got that now. Just want to finish that wine a little bit there because it does go very nice and red here. Okay. Now, more to do with the grapes. I need to define them a little bit more. So I'm using a very dark of blue and red. It's going to put in sort of little defining marks where I kind of see them around there. That's quite dark in there. Darker that one there. Dark here. There's all dark ones there. That's dark there. You see, we're still pushing paint away. That's the beauty of oils. You push it around. To push that out a little bit more. I'm actually pushing away sort of very bright light paint, and it's still kind of working. Now there's a bloom on these. It must be the yeast, and it's the same color as the background. Yeah, okay, so I'm going to take that background color that I already had made up for here, start applying it in places just to get a sense that there's that yeasty surface here. And also there must be some reflection going on of what's around it. But it can't be all that, because that yeasty film is you often see it no matter what circumstances you're in. I did that one there, didn't I? And that one's there. That's another blue. So we're building up this kind of mosaic of strokes. Okay. And even in that reddish one, it's in there too, and around there. We're not going to get that stalk in yet, because I think really that'll have to be going in towards the end. Fill that part there. There. Now, what are we going to do? Well, let's go back to the bread, because this is an alla prima painting. We're bouncing around all over the place. Okay. There's a bit of a shadow under there, and it's a bit of a greyish shadow. So I'm going to take a little bit of black, mix it into my bread mix from before, and that can go in there. And it's a bit grey around here too, and that's kind of to do with the flower, I think, that's on the okay. And let's put some shadowy areas using black and the meat bread. Kind of put a few sort of air bubbles in there. Always the sign of a good bread. I had half of it eaten before I came into the class. That's why you've only got a small bit of bread here. It's like this friend of mine took on a student, an Italian student, one year, because the people were taking on students, to give them accommodation. And the idea is you're supposed to give them a breakfast and a tea and make packed lunches for them before they go out to their schools. And this guy was enormous, absolutely enormous. And there's a name for them in Italian called mamoni, so it's kind of like a mummy's boy. And he had all the sandwiches eaten plus his breakfast before he left the house. I'm putting in little details on that bread because I can't help myself, okay? So we'll always come back to that later. But there are areas that are lighter, in fact, above. So this sort of bready, flowery bloom on there. It's covered in the bloom in this painting. Along here. Okay. So we're going to move on again. I think we'll move on to finish off this kind of area here, or at least make it sort of more complete. Okay, so I had my glass there. I can still see a bit of my drawing. And so I'm going to actually do those things. There's a dark for the rim of the glass, and it's a dark grey. It's like the shadow version of this foreground. Okay, so I'm going to put that in. The only place I can see it, in fact, is here. Okay, now it's very sort of thick at the moment, sort of overly applied, but we sculpt it back into shape, don't we? Okay, there. There's a reflection down there. I'll make sure I put that in. Okay, so we now have a bit of a glass. I'm going to push that up a little bit. So now it's gone thin, but I can see there's a light, very bluish reflection. In fact, slightly greenish. I don't know where that's coming from, but it must be coming from somewhere. It must be reflecting something which is changing that light. You're always looking around you in a painting to see what's going on. I'm going to move that around there. I hope you can still see that a bit better. Reflection on the rim. Now I'm going to need to actually put my hand there and steady. Rim of the glass is going all the way around there like that. Now, likewise, I can see little reflections in that glass, and I'm going to put them in because I can see them. And you paint what you see. Across there like that, across that top there, and there. Reflections around the grapes. Reflection comes down into there, into the glass. Okay, right, what have we got? We've got a dark coming up the side of that I want to record. That comes down there like that, and down there in the glass. Dark across there. Little reflections. There's a bit of red reflection in there, and I'm going to push the background down here. There's a lot going on in that glass, but that just gets lost up the side. It's glass, so it's going to be transparent. You're seeing things through the glass. Okay, let's do a bit with the top of the bottle. There's a light here, and here. The red comes up at the side there. Let me just get more It's red, but it's dark coming up there. And a light at the top of it. Okay. There's a very light green. We're seeing through much less glass certain points up here. For some reason in there we can see more of the blue bottle. Move that there like that. Now let's shape this a little bit better. It curves around there like that. We're not going to start doing writing. Don't worry. It's not necessary. You choose what you leave out, and you can give an impression of the writing, but you don't need to actually put in writing. So, for example, even the logo, which isn't up to much actually on this bottle of wine, but I'm just going to put a kind of an indication that there's something on that label. Okay, there. Maybe even sort of there. But there's no point in getting down to that level of detail. Okay, so some more interesting reflections on the cloth. Comes in there like that. We can see a bit of light in there. This is a mosaic of tones up there. So now we've got a bit of a rise in the, there's a shadow as that falls away from the light there. Push that around so we can see it. Shape that grape. Bit of light in there. Let's go back and put in some more shadows. Push them together there like that. That shadow should actually come off there like that. All right, we're starting to sort of build up the picture now. Let's go back to our grapes. I'm just going to shape that a little bit more. Push that paint out. Now, are there any other sort of... Yes, there's even an orangey part in that grape, which I think we should put in. Of course we should put it in because we can see it. And then that's orangey in there. And that provides a little bit of light in there too. You can see at the top of that. I'm kind of getting into individual grapes, but also I'm avoiding being too specific, because we just want to give the impression of grape. We don't want to start getting down into individual renditions of grapes. You could do that if I suppose if it was just a few grapes, but we've got an entire painting to complete. So dark there. In fact, there's a light in there. Push that around a little bit. push that around a little bit because that doesn't, I'm not going to actually get too sort of specific in there. Let's work on that bread again because there's some missing sort of darks here. So we'll come down there like that and around a bit of definition in those bubbles, etc. And a little bit of crust coming through on that side. Some more dusty sort of, what do you call it, floury parts there. Now, let's shape. We need a bit of a light down the side of that label, and actually down the side of the label here as well. We can put that in. There. Down there. And then there's a bit of a dark in there. Okay, so back to the grapes. Back to the grapes. What was I going to do? Oh, yes. So more lighter yeasty bloom on certain of the things now. And these are just going to be done little flicks of paint. Across the top of that there. Wherever I see it, I'm going to put it in. There's a reflected light around there. Oh, good. They're starting to build up now. There's a lot going on in these grapes. Reflected light there from what it's sitting on. Okay. Back to the glass. You're bringing everything forward at the same time. That's what I'm aiming for. Now, reflections in the bottle. There's an awful lot of reflection going on in this painting. Come down there like that. Push that down. Reflection there. Reflection there. Quite light reflection here. That's coming from my studio, whatever's behind me there. Reflections there. I suppose I'd better finish off that that dark up there. Yeah. That's probably been annoying you more than it's been annoying me. Right. Any pinks in those grapes? Any pinks? Not really, but there's dark oranges down there. Push that out a little bit. Dark going across that grape there. bloom again. All right, okay, so I'm going to put some highlights on those grapes. And some of them are cool and some of them are warm. So for example, on this one here, there's a cool one and then there's a warm one. And it's like that around the painting. So the cool ones are going to be a slightly bluish. I'm going to make them slightly bluish. And those are probably coming from either the skylights that I have in my studio, or the strip lights. Okay, and then there's really warm highlights. So I'm going to make those with white. I'll show you. I'll show you. I'll show you. White, yellow, and red. Okay. But also, I'm just going to add in a little bit of the background. I don't want them to be too bright. Okay. I'm going to put these in where I think they'll be effective there. There. And essentially, because you haven't sort of been overly specific with the painting of the grapes, people are reading the highlights. They're just reading the grape shape where they can see the highlights really. Okay. Bit of a dark. Just going to put a bit of a dark around that one there. Now let's put in that green stalk. Let's go back to the So I'm just going to make up the green that I think that stalk is. Yellow and blue makes green, but it's a toxic green. You know, it's harsh, so we don't want that. We want a little bit of red into it, and that will bring it into a kind of a natural green color space. And then we're going to add in a little bit black because most of it is in shadow. So knock it down a little bit. Oh, I'm not getting any black, am I? There we go. There we go. It's more like it there. So we're going to load up the brush and then sort of try and get an indication of where this would be. Not being overly descriptive. I'm going to put a bit of yellow into it, a bit more red, a bit more yellow. Add that in there. And then put in sort of some variations along the path of that. Okay, so now it's back to something else. What should we do? Back to the glass. Let's put in the highlights of the glass. So there are some, what do you call it, violet ones. There's one here. The highlights make all the difference. In there. Points of light. Across there. Little blue ones there. Have we got one in the bottle? We do. In there. Small highlights. A little one there. Up the top, yes, we do have them. In there. In there. And now some very bright highlights, only in the glass. Okay, going to get some white. Plenty of white. Stick it into a clean part of the palette. And add some touch of yellow. And an even tinier touch of red in this palette. If you had cadmium yellow deep on here, you could probably get away with just using yellow. So highlight there. Highlight across the top. The highlights, I'm sure you'll agree, make all the difference. They make the painting jump out. Across the back there, because that's reflecting the same thing. There. Anything else around here? There are none up around there. I might just give that a bit of light going down there like that. And the same with that one. Okay. All right, and now we're not finished because we need to sort of do something with the painting to make it sort of more complete. So first of all, I think that the on the right could do with a bit of pumping up for the linen, because we don't want to go away without our linen all unpumped. You probably won't find that in the art books. But so let's have a look. So I'm just going to put in some, because linen has a kind of a, well, you know, it's sort of it has a tooth to it. You know, it's reflecting lots of little sort of planes around it. There's a lot going on with linen, kind of far more than cotton, I think. So now we've got these sort of areas where there's little pinks and there's kind of golden colours in the light, and more in there like that. And then we can sort of do something with the shadows. The shadows look a little bit sort of monochrome at the moment, and just down here it's kind of reflecting something that could be seen as slightly greenish, I suppose. So I'm going to make up the kind of colour that I mean. So here, so I put a bit of yellow into the same shadow colour. It's kind of reflecting a slightly ochre colour just down there. Let's bring that over a little bit there. And where else could that be? Yeah, maybe just along here. More greenish. That's very sort of violety, the one that's in there at the moment. There are some differences there. And even here, that's sort of slightly greeny, yellowy, ochre kind of colour. And here too. Go on with this all bloody day and just keep going. And at that point, in a way, it does become therapeutic. I never sort of make the claim that painting is therapeutic. I think it's codology, but it's hard work. But there's value in hard work, isn't there? You know. The therapy comes out of hard work, not out of the mere fact that you're painting. Bit of blue down here again. Okay, so now we've got some undulations in the cloth. Let's put some in there as well, because that's sort of slightly turning away from the light there. And over this side, it kind of goes slightly bluer, I think. So I'm gonna, but still light. And so I'm putting that in there. Okay, and another thing is I would like to do. Oh, nobody told me. There's a massive, great highlight down there. I didn't put it in. Oh, honestly, art is all about learning to observe, isn't it? Push that out there a wee bit. I don't want that to be so obvious. I'm breaking up some things now. I'm breaking up sort of some of the edges. Because it's an optical illusion. It's not, we're not after a photograph. Push that up there like that. I'm pushing the paint around a little bit just to finish off. Make that slightly smaller. See? And I realise that I'm starting to talk really quietly. I should really sort of speak in a stentorian fashion so you can understand me. You there. Now, here we go. And let's push that up a wee bit there. So we lose those sort of little sort of unpainted edges. Got to lose that edge there. I don't particularly want that edge to be such a feature. I'm just using the brush to break up the edges, and I'm not flattening too much, and even sort of things like that. It's a painting. It's supposed to sort of be slightly. Yeah, I'm not very. I lose my ability to speak as I paint. Okay, I'm going to lose the edges here too. I can lose it because the paint is still pliable. You know, it's. And lose the edges of the grapes. Somehow just bring them into their environment, so they're not just hard edges. Things don't tend to look like that when you're with a human eye, because the human eye just concentrates on one thing. You know, that's all it can do. We're only capable of doing that. You know, we sort of we can look at the face, but then the hands become all sketchy. If you ever get the chance to, and you will obviously, to look at a John Singer Sargent painting, just he deals in that exactly. He's masterful at it. Let's bring that up there like that. Push that around there like that. And that there. Honestly, I mean it when I say you can go on all day doing this stuff. Little tweaks and pushing the paint around. Oh, there's a little highlight that I did see at the back of the meniscus of the wine. Across the back there. Doesn't seem important, but I noticed it, and then I have to put it in. and maybe a couple of little ones in there. That's actually the strip lights it's reflecting. Now to do that that highlight down there, it's not the brightest highlight. It isn't the brightest highlight, but it looks to me to be quite warm. So white, yellow. I'm going to use. In fact, it's not far off the. It's not far off the mix I made for the bread. I'm going to put that in there. I'm going to have to use my fingers, a mile stick. You know what a mile stick is? It's what sign writers use to, to steady their hands. Okay. And maybe just a little bit more variation in that bread. Because there's no point going on any further, because that's just sort of window dressing at that stage. We have an alla prima painting now. And let me just, one thing, just going to push that edge around a bit there. Okay, right.
Yeah,
All
great.
right. So let me just do the usual thing. Now, come up closer to you. Whether it's actually sort of doing is auto-focusing. And as I say, you can keep going on and on and on, refining and refining and refining. I could go on for another 2 hours with that.
And the highlights were interesting that you didn't put the white on.
I didn't put the white.
The tablecloth. That was interesting.
The tablecloth was not white.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yes, it is an interesting thing. You're governed by the highlights. You must always be governed by the highlights, and that means you say you